Welcome back, listener. You are listening to the Friday Council, your home for free thought and purposeful discussion on our human condition and all interesting aspects of modern living. If you share in our desire for new ideas and self-improvement, relax your body and contemplate alongside us. Now on the Friday Council.
Welcome back to another episode of the Friday Council podcast. Today is episode 33, recording on a Saturday today.
33?
Yes, 33.
Done.
We're a third way to 100.
Damn, nearly.
Technically, you're on the underside of that.
A third of the way through this, we will nearly be.
Yeah, that's exciting. But today's topic, talked about during the week, was brought about an article regarding a incident which happened in the city here about a drunken king hit which influenced brain damage towards someone who it's a little closer to home because I know someone who knows this person.
Mm-hmm.
But so basically the offender was only charged for 9 months, I believe.
Jailed for 9 months?
No, home detention.
Oh, home D.
And there's a lot of articles, not articles, but like Facebook comment discussion, Twitter, etc., just saying how ridiculous it is. And made me think, are we too laxed on punishment on crimes in New Zealand? Or is it fair? But we thought we'd bring about a discussion about crime.
And
there's and punishment. There's a lot of that going on at the moment with seems like there's always ram raids going on every day, especially through younger generation.
Makes me want to do it. All the cool kids are doing it by the sounds of it.
but yeah, it's one of those things we thought, why not have a talk about crime?
Yeah.
See what we all think.
For anyone who maybe doesn't know, the incident that you talked about it was a coward punch.
Yeah,
king
coward
hit,
punch,
which
king
is
hit.
trying to describe that in case anyone doesn't actually know.
Yeah, so that's basically someone's not looking the other way or not expecting to be hit. You've just come in from the side or from behind and basically hit them.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's caused brain damage.
Brain damage, no good. And he got 9 months home D.
9 months home D.
Which is pretty. A lot of us look back on the COVID lockdowns and thought that was basically home D, and that was a holiday.
You get to play games.
It was essentially a holiday, especially 9 months. You could, sure, it's a light punishment. After a month or two, you start being pretty bored. But I suppose boredom's a light form of punishment. But probably no good. Probably not enough in my opinion. But I also remember reading that one of the biggest jails in New Zealand is basically full at the moment. So I'm sure that's probably quite serious, but the amount of misdemeanors that the public would say deserves jail time would overflow the jails, I imagine.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a thing to take in consideration.
Yeah. What do you guys reckon that guy should have?
On the surface it sounds like too light of a punishment, but we don't have all the facts.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is it's real easy to read these like headlines, and it could very well be too light, but unless we were sitting in court and had all the facts, what was the lead up to it and everything.
You don't want to be too quick to cast judge. Well,
exactly. So to say,
everyone does.
In this case, it does sound pretty bad, but I've heard of other cases where it sounds really bad on the surface, and then you do a little bit of reading, and again, you still don't have access to all the facts, but you dig a little deeper and it's like, you see there's some mitigating factors and it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. Speaking of mitigating factors, that was something I did want to mention as well that I didn't say pre-pod, was taking into consideration like substances. I think in our system, in most systems around the world, if you are drunk or high on something, it can be a mitigating factor and lessen the sentencing.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that's appropriate? Like, should you, if you get blackout drunk and then king hit someone, is that worse or better than just being sober and king hitting someone?
It's so hard to say.
So on the surface, it sounds like if you're sober or of sound mind when you do something, right? Like you would argue you know what you're doing. If you're drunk or abusing substances, then you could argue you don't know what you're doing. But I would like to think most people who have ever been drunk would kind of know, like, am I a violent person or am I like a happy sort of drunk or whatever. But I don't think that should be used as an excuse to minimize a sentence.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, well,
I agree. That's part of the risk of getting drunk. Is like I could do something stupid and I'm consenting basically.
And that happens all the time.
Speaking of consent, that kind of bleeds into like the Me Too, like girls getting super drunk and then they're like, well, they can't make an appropriate decision. That's kind of I think in my head that's almost the same thing. They're saying like because of the drug, it wasn't entirely their fault saying yes when they actually meant no. Same with like the King hit, because he was drunk. It's not entirely his fault because he was drunk. I think it's just like you got to be consistent. You got to say, it shouldn't be a mitigating factor at all, like less than anything.
And I think we should probably disclose most for us three anyway. Like we never go out drinking in town or anything.
Not in town, no.
Well, not for the past few years anyway. Is the last time I've probably been. Yeah, but so yeah, like to be honest, not entirely sure like the environment, what it's like when you're out drinking with lots of people. There's a lot of drunken debauchery.
There's a lot of like
alpha male
tension. There's always troublemakers out there. You always get that vibe about these, probably deeply insecure males who
roided up.
Yeah, roided up, whatever it is, who want to assert their dominance. You look at them the wrong way, and then it's on sort of thing. And we've all heard stories of like multiple incidents. I can think of at least two guys that I went to school with who are older than us who were the ones delivering some serious blows to people, both massive guys.
Roided up?
Oh, I don't know if they're roided up or not.
I know guys.
I know who you're talking
similar
about.
people.
You'll know at least one of them.
Yeah.
Everyone probably knows someone like that. Yeah, but I know people that they were roided up, confirmed.
Right.
They were just like king hitting people every weekend.
So, town can be a dangerous place. There's rapists out there if you're female, and even if you're male, maybe. Probably more likely if you're female though.
Yeah.
There's rapists, and there's scrappers, for lack of a better term, who are troublemakers. There's troublemakers out there at night.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be a bit vigilant, unfortunately. But that's like anything in society, I think. When you get large groups of people, there's always going to be stupid
and
troublemakers.
And drugs. Large amount of people and drugs.
Especially we talk about this. I think Joe Rogan might be the one who I've heard talk about it in defense of like, may even have been in defense of the Proud Boys or whatever they are over there. It's saying when you get a large enough group of people, there's going to be troublemakers. Similar here with the protests. I think like between 95 and 98, 99% of those people were there for genuine reasons, but there was a 1 or 2% who were there to create trouble, and those are the ones at the end you saw who were the ones throwing bricks and lighting fires and stuff. They are troublemakers. So if you get a large enough group, you're going to get troublemakers. I guess it's a little bit of a tangent because it's
What about the punishment of that COVID protest that any New Zealanders will remember fondly? I'm sure. Of the Wellington ones. I think imagine if the police force had gone down real hard on them, it'd kind of prove that they'd be like, look at this, like government like overreach. We were just peacefully protesting.
Yeah, but I don't. To be honest, I don't know what happened there afterwards. No. I think there were some at least. I remember things like floating around Facebook where police are putting pictures of the people some of the people they had identified as the troublemakers and were looking for information. So I'd imagine there was probably a few people there who got some hefty punishment, but I can't say that for sure. I know that Billy TK guy, I think that's his name, Billy TK. The conspiracy theorist dude.
Billy TK.
I believe he's been given a jail sentence for hosting illegal lockdown protests.
Right.
That's separate to the Wellington one, but he was doing his own protest. And I believe he's just recently been jailed for that, and that was for just a protest, an illegal protest because of the COVID rules and laws. I think shit like that should be dropped as long as it wasn't like a troublemaking protest, because I think we can all look back in hindsight and agree like the rules in place were ridiculous. Like the right to protest was taken away for very stupid reasons. Like at the time it was sold as it's dangerous, whatever, COVID can spread. But yeah, well, that clearly wasn't the case. So I think protesting alone, any charges around that should be scrapped. But that's obviously not the way it is. I guess they want to make an example of the big guns.
Yeah, and you saying making an example, I think that's a viable tactic, as unfair as it is maybe on the person who's being used as an example. I think scare the rest of the public, and it saves jail spaces. If you arrest like one person real hardcore, maybe give them like an overly zealous
you're 100% right
punishment. Yeah,
and
unfortunately a viable
that's
method.
a very common thing, and I've seen or heard that in even YouTube videos or whatever of those like crime shows that they have where they're saying like you're screwed, like the judge is going to make an example of you to set as a deterrent. And that we've touched on that before, how much nuance there is in the legal system. Two people could have basically the exact same case and get different sentences because there's a lot of nuance in law. There's not just this concrete 10 years for this. There's guidelines, but within that there's a lot of variance in the sentences and punishments handed down. But again, a really good example of stringent punishments to a small group of people was after World War II with the Nuremberg trials, where the Allies said, we're not going to try and punish everyone who was involved in this war. We'll pick out 100 of the worst people and we'll put them to the gallows, sentence them to death, and that sends a message, sort of thing. Obviously, it wasn't. I mean, yes, that wasn't really a deterrent. That was strictly punishment, but it was showing, this is, yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So yes, that's a variation of that. Heavy sentences can be handed down to as a deterrent. That's especially flavor of the month sort of thing. Like if there's some is a certain crime spike or a certain whatever incident, they would potentially go harder than usual. To try and get that back down.
That might be a good way to go for the ram raids. It might be past biting it in the bud stage already. It might be too mainstream, but potentially
the problem with
going
that,
real hard on some of the underage kids.
The problem with that is it's so messy because apparently like a lot of these kids are 12, 13, 15. They're very young. They're not adults. So the guidelines are completely different, I don't believe. And I think if you're 16, you can be charged as an adult if you commit a violent crime, like murder, maybe assault, but I don't know that a ram raid, unless they hurt someone in the process, would be considered. So even if you're 16, I don't think you can be charged as an adult unless you've really hurt someone or killed someone. But even if you're below, I think if you're below 16 and you kill someone, you still can't be charged as an adult. But anyway, that's when we're talking about, and specifically ram raids, it's very messy because a lot of these kids are not even close to being able to be charged as adults. So the guidelines for those punishments are completely different. I believe like the worst it can be is what do they call it? Juvenile something or other, juvenile
detention.
Yeah, it might be juvenile detention. Yeah, it's
Centers,
like jail for kids, but it's not jail. Yeah. And you probably have to have like a string of offences before you even get that. And I think that makes sense to an extent. Again, this is where it's like poverty. There's no easy solution. We wish if we could just throw money at it, that it would solve it. We wish if we could just throw jail at crime, it would solve it. But in the case of kids, we can understand it's nuanced and less severe for a very good reason, because their brains are not even close to being fully developed. And the goal is rehabilitation, and hopefully these kids, it's like a form of being drunk in a way. Their brain's not fully developed, so we say they're not completely in control of themselves, sort of thing. But again, I don't know what the solution is, because equally at the same time, we can see that crime is out of control because there is virtually no punishment for these kids. So I don't know. The boot camp's the new big idea from the National Party. I don't know. That's,
or
I think they need love rather than
Ankle
more
bracelets.
punishment.
Yeah,
They need more love.
That's it. But how do you do that? And this is where we get into this, and this ties in with poverty. A lot of these kids will be
Yeah.
coming from impoverished and also traumatic families where there's violence, abuse, that sort of stuff, and
They don't want to be home, so they go out and make trouble.
but also that's messing them up. If you've been beaten up as a child, or your dad's a gang member who's already been involved in lots of crime, and you're going to be predisposed to that. You're far more likely to be involved in crime if you've got family members, especially parents, who are criminals than coming from middle class families where there's no crime.
yeah,
But I think again the problem is I've from the very little reading I've done on ideas like boot camp is they work for a lot of kids when they're at the boot camp and they're in a positive environment with lots of love and good role models. As soon as they go back to their shitty household, it all goes out the window. And it's the same with criminals who go into jail. A lot of them can get on the straight and narrow in jail when there's programs there, come back out, the old mates drag them back down. So it's so messy. How do you...
It's a pro for needing community, because that's essentially what they got. They're surrounded all of a sudden by a more positive,
Yes.
believing in them community.
Yes, and giving them positive reinforcement.
And that's more the result. And I think everyone with half a brain will realize that it's not just a kid commits a crime. It's like way bigger than that.
Yes, and that it's so messy because it's easy to just go for punish the kid or punish the criminal because they've done something terrible. And this is what, but yeah, first of all, yeah, when we take the big picture view, a lot of these kids, when there's all these factors, they're beaten as a child, their parents were meth heads, whatever it is, they weren't getting lunch at school, a whole host of things, fetal alcohol syndrome, just a whole myriad of factors. And the court system does take that into account to an extent. You do get mitigation if you've come from horrific households. It's not you don't get off scot-free unless it's such a small crime, but you might get years taken off your sentence if they look back and we say, oh, well, we can understand how you turned out the way you did because,
yeah. Oh, I mean, I've often heard that in some circumstances, having something to replace the desire to misbehave or to be involved in crime, something like martial arts, for example, where it's like you can take competitive, you can take frustration out in a controlled environment, and at the same time you're learning a skill.
And a good example of that is, I don't know, I'm pretty sure there was a dude in New Zealand who this happened to. He was like a hacker. He was doing all sorts of hardcore hacking, and then it was highly illegal, and he got caught. But then the police or whatever, the court system was like, well, you can use our skills to work for us, and you can help us, hack for good reasons or help improve defenses. And that's a really good example of that. That's a kid, I think it was a kid, young, maybe in their 20s, who was doing something quite, skillful, but in a kind of nefarious way. But those skills could be used for positive, in a positive manner. And it'll be the same for a lot of these kids who are, they say a lot of it's for the thrill of it, not for the money. It's like they're posting on TikTok. It's the rush, the adrenaline rush, and the notoriety. If that could be replaced in a healthy vehicle, healthy medium, I don't know exactly what that is, and it'll be dependent on the kid. But a competitive sport, martial arts, or
it's even like a similar thing. You can kind of I don't know. Most of us have probably been the age where you would knock on someone's door and you'd run away.
It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Just a less extreme.
You're just doing it for the sake of doing it because you think it's funny, but it's not. But
well, it is.
It is, but it isn't.
It is, but it's harmful in a very minor way. But it's an inconvenience.
It's an inconvenience, but in terms of when you're you're breaking into dairies or whatever, robbing jewelry stores and trying to smash and grab, at some point you got to draw the line.
Yes.
It's a good point though. It is kind of it's the same causes for the behaviour. Probably it's just we would have done it to a lesser extent, like ding dong ditching.
Yeah,
it's
or
relatively harmless. It's
throwing
still on the
eggs
scale of
someone's
bad,
house or something.
but it's like right at the beginning of the
Yes.
scale of bad.
Yeah.
But
It's
you,
very
then you have that
harmless.
slippery slope
Yeah.
argument. Then if you like,
Yeah.
if you're not punishing early enough, like even if it's the smallest of things, then are you setting a precedent that they can then further on get away with doing something different? Or
Yeah. It's such a tough
Yeah,
one.
it's-
It's like the poverty one. There is no simple answer, and I don't think you can ever resolve it. You can only move it one way or the other. You can have more punishment, which I guess will be a deterrent for others and keep some of those criminals off the street. But then, you're potentially screwing those kids for the rest of their life. Or you can be lenient, and some of those kids might turn out well, but then others get away. It's just
I think you need a bit of both.
Yeah,
I
Chris
agree.
Williams
you
and
definitely can't have like a scot-free sort of thing. There's got to be punishment. I think I like the idea of everyone deserves a second chance. So especially if we're talking about kids, you do a ram raid or whatever, you get caught, you get rehabilitated once, you do it a second time, there's going to be a juvenile or whatever. You're going to go to jail when you turn 17 or something. Has become an adult, something like that. You get one chance, and obviously it depends. If you kill someone, you can't get a second chance. Well, eventually you can, but you have to do some serious punishment for that. But you do a burglary sort of thing, I'm okay with kids getting a chance, some strict, strong rehabilitation, try and get them on the right path. But you do it a second time, GG.
GG. Yeah, I think you do need that. You need something bad to run away from, like the idea or threat of jail time or something really punishing like that, which I don't think is maybe even punishing enough for some of the crimes. Like if someone wants to commit a murder, I don't know if jail, just like being on your own in jail cells, that much of a deterrent. But and then you also need something positive at the other end to balance it out. Like I could have a good life with a good job, but then like you say, it bleeds into many other things where in those situations, like oftentimes all they can imagine for themselves is some road worker or something in life. So it's like, why? Yeah, there's not that much incentive to stay on the straight and narrow.
Yes, it's messy, and that's as you say, it bleeds into a whole lot of other things. And like one of the big ones is obviously like the school system. So that would be secondary to parenting. The second thing that's probably going to have the biggest impact on your, upbringing. And I think we can probably all agree that school, a typical school, doesn't work for a lot of kids. So that's another thing that could be overhauled.
I like my father's half joking, maybe a bit less than half joking suggestion whenever this was on the news growing up, but I've actually come to seriously consider it a bit more, is for these misdemeanors, perhaps not ram raid, I don't know, it's a matter of opinion as to what would justify it, but losing chopping off part of a finger, so like up to your first, like your pinky, it starts off with your pinky and you go up to there, that would be a deterrent. I think that is for a child, that is more of a deterrent, although it's hard for them to imagine that in the future without a developed prefrontal cortex, but sometimes a digit going off, it's real brutal, but that would work more than what do they get? They get nothing. Then absolutely nothing. you get a chance. Next time you're losing the first digit of your pinky. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to do anything really impact your life. But you don't want to.
No, well, of course not. That could be a deterrent, but is it like a moral deterrent?
Yeah.
Very murky. I see the angle, but I don't know.
Slippery slope,
possibly. But just out of curiosity,
fair enough.
Growing up as kids, teenagers, adolescents, were you guys grounded or punished? Or you could have been perfect.
Pretty
perfect kids.
Yeah,
I was pretty pussy kid, to be honest. I think I didn't have that like pulsing raging testosterone, like "fuck you, mum and dad." Like, I didn't really have that, so
I never had that energy, but I was pretty naughty
Yeah.
in terms of like at school and stuff. And obviously the big one, which
I
both
just got
of you
pinched,
know.
pinched in timeout, like smacked in timeouts. I think.
Yeah, I
briefly.
certainly copped a few spankings.
Mm.
But my parents, I think, I would say that's one thing my parents did very well. I feel that they were strong, I guess, on rehabilitation more than throwing the book at me. So the best example of that, which you both know about, was like when I got caught trading marijuana at primary school. Now they could have. That's the typical like you grounding for like a.
Do you want to give a quick 5-second recap of that story?
Okay,
'Cause it's
so
a cool story.
my brother, who's like 15 years older than me, is a big pot smoker. So I was able to get into a stash when I was 12 years old, and I traded some for chocolate milk at primary
So
school.
good.
And the dude who I traded it to went around showing everyone.
Yeah,
After you
we-
saying you like don't show anyone, didn't you?
I think I didn't explicitly say it before he did it, but when he was about to do it, I said, "Don't do that. It's stupid." And anyway, he did it, and of course, people went and narked.
Just for side information, this guy is now a fully fledged neo-Nazi.
I believe he might be reformed.
Oh, he can be
but he's been in prison, and actually,
Yeah.
he's a really good example because he came from a messed up family.
Yeah, very messed up.
So that's a really good example. But just to get
Wow.
back to that, yeah. So a very serious offence, I guess, something illegal. Police could have been involved, could have been expelled, all that sort of thing. So the school, I thought, dealt with it very well as well. They didn't get police involved. They didn't expel me or the other guy. They just kept, as I said, they kept us separated. I had to go be in the office, away from the other kids for
Yeah.
To work in the
Well, it was obviously
principal's
not. It
office.
wasn't really premeditated or that evil intent. It
No,
was just
so
you,
that's-
but kid being.
but still,
you wanted some
yeah.
chalky milk, man.
Yeah, and my parents are very much the same. They could have absolutely thrown the book at me, grounded me, whatever, but they were, of course, extremely angry at first. And then I remember, again, the absolute lashing, vocal lashing, not physical lashing, when my mum came home that day. I can't remember what my dad did. But then, like, as the evening wore on, they calmed down and just like write an apology letter to the school, to the principal or whatever. And I did that, and yeah, so there was very little repercussion really, but there was, I guess, a focus on rehabilitation, and that always stuck with me. That could have ruined my life, or
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have ruined it, but
Yeah.
I
Permanent
wouldn't have gone
X
to
on your
St.
name.
Bede's because I would have never got into St. Bede's. Would have maybe even lucky if I could even get to Shirley. It might have ended up at Marahau.
Hey,
No, I mean, I would be lucky if I
Yeah.
could get that. Shirley might not even take me for having that on my. So it could have drastically altered the pathway of my life, and to this day, I always hold that. I'm very grateful to the principal and to my parents for the way they dealt with that.
isn't it ironic that you? So from the school's perspective, the two 12-year-olds, the narc that or the kid that was telling everyone that eventually, and then he caved when he was interviewed about
Yes.
it. But you said, and you who supplied the cannabis. He was the one that turned into the
Yes.
neo-Nazi,
Yes.
and you were the one
Yes,
that turned a great model
yeah,
citizen.
And the difference there is because I was very fortunate in that I do have pretty good parents, as
Yeah.
much as I can be harsh on them.
Yeah.
And he had, I don't believe his mother was around, and his dad was an alcoholic.
His dad's alcoholic. He grew up in the same neighbourhood that I did.
Jolly Street, Ruffers.
Yeah.
I believe
He
they
would-
voted worst street in Christchurch recently.
You'd constantly see his dad biking around on his
Drunk.
black bike with a box of
Yeah.
drink.
He'd
like
come and pick
beer.
him up on his bike at school with a box of beers on his bike.
Yeah.
So
he
he
was
came.
picking up
Makes you
like
cringe,
cigarette
eh?
butts on the corner of the
Yes.
in the gutter and everything. Just
So that's the difference there, is that I had good parents to get me on the straight and narrow,
Yeah.
and I got to go to a good high school. He didn't have those. I don't know. Did he go to like Linwood?
Linwood
Yeah.
College. Yeah.
So not the greatest of high schools, and just more so
Yeah.
the horrible family. So that's tragic. But
Yeah.
I do believe that he might be reformed. Right? I've had a quick gaze at his Facebook, maybe a few months ago, and he did do a stint in prison, and I believe I got the gist. I can't remember if he had post, but
he's got a kid. Or
he's
two
two
kids.
kids. So I
maybe?
believe
Yeah.
hopefully jail that happened. He got the guidance in jail, and it's worked for him.
Yeah.
So that's very positive for him.
I think the feeling I just got from you guys explaining this kid's dad as a kid, I was just like it's like a cringe, like a sinking. It's like, oh man, come on, because everyone you can intuitively know what's gonna happen, like how that kid's gonna you can roughly
at
guess.
the age, I didn't too naive. At the age, I didn't really.
Yeah,
as an adult,
you're like,
clear
oh
as day.
god, like someone do something, and everyone knows something's wrong, but no one really knows how to exactly fix it, because like you said, it's like we said, it's so complicated and holistic nature, but you're like, everyone knows it's gonna end badly, you know.
Yeah.
Like with like the cracked out neighbours,
Yeah.
like their kid, it's like it's just not gonna. It's
Yeah,
like,
so
it's
such
draining.
Yeah,
it's
it's such a tough one, isn't it? When
whose job is it to intervene?
Yeah,
it's such a tough. Again, there's just no easy solutions. It's so messy.
I'll say I was never like, I was always told, oh yeah, we're going to ground you, but the times that I was quote unquote grounded, it was like I just couldn't go out, which I hardly ever did.
Yeah.
And like they never took anything away from me. It was just like, you're not going. So like it was basically like nothing.
Yeah.
However, I was smacked if I did misbehave.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, everyone's got different views on that, but I think for the most part it turned out okay.
Yeah, I don't think as a kid, like I would ever think about, oh, I might get smacked if I do this thing. It'd always be like you say, prefrontal cortex not developed, couldn't imagine future scenarios. So I just do something, and then I'd think about, oh shit, if I get caught, I'm gonna get smacked.
I guess that's the argument against smacking, isn't it?
It doesn't.
If you're doing something that's
downstream,
that an adult can process is not sensible, but a child can't. Is it fair to be smacked? I don't. Yeah, again, it's messy. I don't think, for me personally, it was like, I don't think I'm overly traumatized from being smacked, but it was only smack. Some of them were, I think there might have been like a wooden spoon involved once, but on the bum as well, so it wasn't like hidings. But then there's an argument, does that actually get you on the straight and narrow? I was a pretty I think I was not terribly bad kid, but I was certainly, and below average in behaviour for pretty much the whole primary school and high school. So
I wouldn't say there's a correlation between like families or cultures even. I don't have any hard evidence, but cultures that are more into like corporal punishment, is that the word? Corporal punishment, like physical punishment or whatever. Families and cultures that
Asians.
they beat the kids down, and then the success or crime rates of those families or cultures. I don't think there's any correlation.
I
Probably.
don't.
There might be an inverse even.
I
families.
don't know. There possibly could be, or it could just be stereotypes that we can all think of the Asian student, Asian.
You think
human.
Asians? See, I think like, I don't know,
Pacifica?
African Americans joke about it on TikTok about getting hidings from their parents.
I definitely don't think it works in that case, but that's probably because it's more like, abuse form, and the strict Asian sort of, it's more a guidance thing. It's probably still over the top, but it's also with good, like, encouraging them to do homework and stuff like that. Whereas unfortunately, in the African American, not all African American examples, and the stereotypical African American example, I think it's more like just beat the shit out of you, and then
they kind of joke about it when they're adults.
You go on your merry way sort of thing. Whereas in the Asian sense, it's more like whack. Now, here, get back on the straight and narrow guidance.
Possibly, yeah. I have no idea.
It's like the Simpsons meme where it's like, the parent goes into the kid's room doing homework. He's like, "Are you a doctor yet?" It's like, no, you don't. Like, come talk to me when you're a doctor.
There's a funny dude. I think I've seen like snaps of him a few times. Vin Dooley on Instagram, and he does like skits about that.
It's childhood.
Yeah, and you can see like it's funny, but I think that's a trauma response. It's like it's a cope. You can see it's funny, but I think deep down that there's like a deep trauma, and making jokes about it is his way of...
Yeah, they joke about being terrified of it. From what I've seen, it seems like they were, as kids, they were absolutely terrified of getting...
Would it be? And that will have like a lasting... It will probably get them to be, as you see, probably very timid, but they'll be very disciplined, but also timid. And then there's also...
Might not be for the right reasons.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then there's also the fact that even if you beat them into submission, get them to be these role model peoples, I believe, certainly with Korea and I think Japan, Suicide rates are hugely high, like on a global scale. So again, that's just 2 Asian countries. So I don't know if that's specifically because of that, and I don't know if suicide rates are high in other. But yeah, there's a case there that they might be not cause problems as kids, but they grow up to be miserable, traumatized adults who kill themselves.
It's like the culture's like too tight on
exactly.
On you.
So it's safe. They won't commit crimes, but they might kill themselves.
Yeah, it's
and if
too
they don't
tense.
kill themselves, they might be just miserable as a timid, shy, reclusive, whatever. Just
And that brings to mind like if like the Asian cultures, as far as stereotypes go, real tense, like constricting culturally
Yes.
on you, which is probably a cause of the high suicide rates. But then again, like you probably need if it's too tight, it's bad. If you let them kids go too wide with ram raids, it's bad.
Yep.
But you do need some space, like with ding dong ditching. You need like some space to be like kind of reckless
Yep.
and naughty, and like
Yes.
and that's what kids do and toddlers do, right? They
Yes.
like test the limits.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what
Like-
you do once you
like
outgrow
an-
your family.
An
maybe.
example we've obviously talked about in a past episode being like scamming, for example. Like for me growing up, it was like aware that there are people out there that do annoying things like trying to rip people off and take money. But to my wife, who for the most part grew up in like quite sheltered environment, like the thought of I'll put a deposit on holding this item and then I'll pick it up from them. It's like, nah, like why would you do that for? Like they're just like so naive. And so I think your upbringing can definitely play a role on your response to like punishment. And I guess if you're not expecting it, or if you're getting constantly able to push the boundaries and test limits on what you can do and get away with, well, you're more likely to try it in society, like everyday society. How do you
There's still also an argument, I guess, is I think most humans are inherently good. So for me, I feel like I was a boundary pusher. I never did anything insane, but I never really got many severe punishments. But I'm not a criminal adult because I think I'm a good
just
person.
doesn't pay tax.
I'll pay taxes when I become a successful trader.
Yeah.
Which is
Soon.
it's been a good week of trading. So, so I think I'm an inherently non-evil person. So another good example of that is the classic example of Kenny Vespini. It's pretty clear.
Lots of wisdom in that show.
A lot of wisdom in that show. There really is.
Yeah.
Kenny clearly had a very loving mother. I think his dad died at a young age. But he was clearly a boundary pusher, and there's very little punishment. And Spenny often gets angry about that. He's like, this is why he is, because he never got any punishment. But again, he's a boundary pusher, but he's not a criminal, or at the very least not a hardcore criminal. He might have, smoked weed or something, shit like that. So I think most people are inherently good people. So even if they do get away with, again, the small things, not ram raids, but ding dong ditching and I don't know, other petty, things like that.
Prank calls.
They can still come out as good, mature adults. And I can pick off a few people that we went to high school, who've turned out, one of them's runs a bakery now. He was a naughty kid, very naughty kid at both primary school. My mum taught him, and he was also very naughty at high school. And now he's a completely functional, upstanding citizen. Another dude, he was the OCD hand washing guy. My mum taught him at primary school, and he was naughty as one of the naughtiest kids at primary school, and he became a nerd at high school, so that was quite a fast transition. But again, he's probably I believe a pilot or something now. So you can be a boundary pusher and get away with things, essentially, or get off very lightly, detention and stuff like that, very minor punishments, and still become a normal functional adult, if you get what I mean. 'Cause I think most people are inherently good. It's just those bad apples when they don't get that structure, or severe severe is not the right word, but right punishment that can then it goes from ding dong ditching to lighting things on fire to stealing,
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
I hate to be banging on about it, but I really think it's one of the core reasons why we have a lot of problems is like a well functioning local like tight community will kind of buffer out the bad eggs, and everyone kind of is pulled into the middle, you know. So
It's like a bell curve.
yeah, it's like a bell curve, but also like has this like
Yeah.
gravitational like pull if it's a working tight one. And I think mentioning community, we mentioned it's a holistic problem. A community is like holistic by nature. There's lots of different aspects, but
I
the
think,
main and I just want to
Yeah.
say that you think about the like small like hunter gatherer tribes in Africa where their punishments often involve like sitting someone, one of the tribes at least, sits someone in a circle and the whole tribe sits around them and just like, I don't know what they do. They
Eat them.
berate them, or they just like, oh no, they like hug them or something. They
I
like
remember-
are hugged by the whole community.
Because I remember that a very similar thing happened to me at primary school. You probably weren't in the class that I was in. It was in Miss Fisher's class.
Yeah, I definitely was.
Right.
On
It was me, and he was another somewhat of a bad apple, but I can also now see that one of his parents is messed up. Michael was the first name.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
That thing.
Him and I can't remember what we were doing, but we did something, and we might have been I don't know, bullying someone in a very, I think, minor way, but that teacher made us stand up on the desks and everyone got to like hurl abuse at us. Abuse might be an overstatement, but hurl things that they didn't like. I don't like you because I don't like the way you talk to me. Like spray
interesting.
us. Very interesting. I'm not sure that would be by the book. If there was a complaint made about that, there was probably would be an investigation. But it's just very. Although you changed, it went from berating to hugging, loving. But
Yeah, that's what I think that's real important anyway. Yeah, that's my point. Is
Yeah,
a lot of the kids,
yeah,
I think they need
what-
more love, and
Yes,
in these
and
like
what-
a lot of the Amazonian tribes as well. There's almost no crime. Like
Okay,
the smaller
yeah.
tribes, there's very little crime.
what
And I think it's
yeah.
because it's
Well-
it's such in your face what your impact's going to have.
Well,
on
that's
everyone.
it, and because everyone knows everyone in that tribe, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's like these ram raiders aren't going to ram raid their family's dairy, are they?
Yeah, yeah.
They're not going to steal their family's car, or
Yeah.
maybe some will, but for the most part,
Yeah, well,
they're
you're
not
not going to
gonna-
rob your neighbours even.
exactly,
Still.
you're not all your friends,
Yeah, your
unless
friends.
you're. I mean, there will be a very small
Yes.
minority of scum who would do
Yeah.
that, but even a lot of these just stereotypical criminals wouldn't rob their friends and family. So that's it. In the tribe, everyone knows everyone, and you're not going to rob your friends and your family. You're not
Yeah.
going to rob your tribe. And also, just to add to that, I think in those sort of tribal environment, group environments, community environments, whatever you want to call it, there's like, if you're the bad egg, you're like letting everyone down. So there's an incentive not to do that, because I think most people don't want to let down their tribe, do they? So an example of that, actually a good example.
Yeah,
I can
gang
give-
members don't want to let down the gang.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
they'll kill other people for the gang.
Yes.
and
So that would be
that's
a bad way of
Yeah.
that. But yes, that's right.
yeah.
Somewhat of a good example of that would be, this is a real world example. I remember playing rugby at high school. We had a guy on the team who was a troublemaker, and as soon as he came onto the field, he like punched someone from the opposite team and got carded. And he thought that was what we're about, because it was the social rugby team, the Beacons rugby team, which has a reputation as being like fun and troublemaking, whatever, looking for fights and stuff like that. But we weren't like that. The rest of the team wasn't interested in that. We were there to play rugby, and so everyone got furious at him. And of course, he never did that again. That's an example of that, whereas you're letting down the team, and there's a cost to that, because if you go down a man, you're costing the tribe, the team. So I think another example of that, you probably be examples like military and stuff like that, band of brothers, right? You're not going to want to let down your team, especially in life and death situations. So I think if there's an incentive, but I think that can only work in a small group, can't it? It can't. I think that's the problem. Again, it goes back to a large enough group, which society as a whole is.
blend in and not.
There's not. You can't, unless you get something like a war, where you can get that community as the entire country. You're fighting for your country.
Yeah.
Unless you could get that on an everyday basis, like you can't band together as New Zealand,
Yeah.
and there's not that. Yeah, it's just too big. So I think that's the problem. Again, you get a large enough group, unless you have a spectacularly rare circumstances like a world war or just a war. You're gonna have these bad eggs and outliers and
Yeah.
deviants, and
I agree.
It's
It's
cost
like
of doing business.
even good standing citizens find it way easier to potentially, like, if you accidentally get extra product from like a big faceless corporation,
they
or
think-
I didn't pay for this. You
Yeah.
go, I don't
They
know.
make
If it's a
millions
if it's a
anyway.
tiny, if it's a tiny little startup like a dairy, like, oh shit, I didn't pay for this. Oh, you'll go back and pay.
Yeah,
But
that's
if
actually an
you get
interesting
home
point, yeah.
from
Just-
the warehouse or Kmart, you're like,
Macca's
I didn't pay.
gave you an extra hash brown.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if it
corporation.
was a Thai place, your
Yes.
local Thai place, you'd be
That's
like, oh, sorry, you forgot to charge me. You'd say right then and there, actually, usually. You'd be
That-
like,
yeah,
oh,
I
I
had
don't
that
think you
happen.
charged me.
Yeah,
But
that
if
happened to
McDonald's
me.
here give you a free fries, you're going to be like,
I actually
Sure, I don't
want
care.
to just point out an example. McDonald's, I did go through the drive-through two weeks ago, and they handed me a drink. I hadn't ordered one, and I actually said, no, I didn't actually have a drink with my order, and gave it back to them. I was like, I easily could have taken
The
this.
same
but
thing happened to me with Countdown yesterday, and I got my groceries delivered. There was like 4 paper towel rolls there. I'm like, I didn't order these, and he took me
Yeah.
back. So
It's just the thing.
Yeah.
It's, you
Yeah.
scroll
I-
up
if that was a 12-pack of Heinekens, though, would you have said that?
no.
Yeah.
probably
No.
not.
No, to be fair, like I think I am pretty good in that regard. Not,
Point being, though, is
but
when
yeah, I
it's-
get what you mean.
yeah,
I
when
think
it's not-
most people.
There's
would-
no face to it.
Yes,
and it's
it's
local.
easy to say. And to be fair, so I think I'm pretty good at an example like that, but I still pirate movies and stuff.
Yeah.
Only when I have to, because I'll watch it on Netflix if it's available on Netflix, or TVNZ on demand or whatever. But if I can't, I'm not paying $5 to watch it on YouTube
Yeah,
for a single movie.
That's how most people justify their immoral behaviour.
Yeah, but
That's
I'm, yeah,
somewhere.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to admit like that's.
Yeah, same.
I used to, as a kid, as a teenager, I had that argument. Oh, the music companies make millions anyway.
Yeah.
The movie makers make millions anyway, so it doesn't matter. Whereas as an adult, no, that's bullshit. You're stealing someone's work. I do it. It's not. There's no justification for it. I just do it. I actually just downloaded the whole series of Dragon Ball Z, the whole thing from start to front. So
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I wanted to bring this up, kind of potentially swinging it back a little bit. When
Should
you
we
mentioned
just
your cannabis story.
So should we just share our crimes?
yeah,
expose
GCSB
ourselves.
is going to be on too, man.
Yeah.
That was a big thing back in like 2011, probably 2011 was roughly when they brought in the 3 strikes policy for piracy. Do you remember that? The
Yeah,
national
never
government.
had that. but
I don't think anyone.
I think I
ever,
knew someone who had one. Their ISP was Spark,
and they
but
got.
but I
don't
never
think
had that
I
before.
certainly never had it, but I don't believe that anyone was ever like criminally tried
Yeah.
for piracy.
Too many
But they
people
were-
were doing it.
They were
probably.
threatening it. I think that's it. You got 3 strikes and then you lost your internet and you had like a court case or something. But I don't believe anyone ever got tried.
Maybe it even works on a governmental scale. Like, why is the New Zealand government going to spend money and time and resources on like $1 billion Marvel, like Disney, like protecting Disney in America?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I think there's deeper things there because I think that all tied in with the US government, Kim.com. They were after him for him mega
Yeah,
upload
right.
piracy. So there was higher
True.
powers
No
that were.
doubt.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah,
say
you
you
finish
mentioned
your question.
you mentioned cannabis and it got me thinking about. I think
Okay,
a lot of
this-
people's
yeah, it's good.
gripe with punishments, like their initial story of the guy doing the king hit, it's physical assault.
Yes,
There'll be laws written down for physical assault, and a lot of people's gripes come when this person has like a mitigating factor or
Mm-hmm.
that nothing, it doesn't seem quite appropriate, and there's a bending of the law to not put this guy in jail or woman in jail, and enforcement, like lack of enforcement
Yeah,
of the laws that are already there, I think bugs a lot of people. But then again, I think, oh yeah, sure, they should be enforced. If it's written down, enforce them. That's what they're there
Yeah.
for. It's the point. But there are laws like cannabis criminalization that I think are bogus. So if they were
Yes.
being enforced everywhere,
Yes.
you'd have these
So-
peaceful, happy,
Yeah.
chill
So-
stoners being arrested left, front,
So,
centre.
so I think that
Just one last
Okay.
thing. Even more so for like a mushroom or LSD. Anyone who's tried them knows that they're not gonna. You're not robbing dairies on mushrooms.
Yeah.
And they're class A, so they have
Yeah,
very
so
explicit
stupid. Yeah.
consequences for possession and sale of those.
Yeah.
And if those laws are being enforced, then we're going to have issues as well.
So I think the good thing is there is a lot of discretion applied around like possession of drugs, not supply of drugs in New Zealand. Even for things like mushrooms, I'm pretty sure if you only had like a single dose worth, cop will be like, don't do that again, take it off
I
you.
didn't see. Like, I reckon they'll just be like, I didn't see.
I
this.
mean, yeah, one of the cop family that we know, I spoke to one of them about if you had like a gram of MDMA, and he said, yeah, we'll just take it off you and give you a warning.
Take it off you and we'll use it at a Christmas party.
No doubt, no doubt. But yeah, I think there is a lot of discretion applied, which is good, but still not enough. I think my ideal legal system is a libertarian legal system. So if you're doing something that doesn't harm someone else, it's legal. So if you're smoking pot, you're smoking crack, as long as you don't then go out and rob a dairy or drive your car and crash into someone while you're on crack, if you're just doing it at home and no one's being harmed by it, then that shouldn't be a crime. I think all drug laws should be ripped out.
What if, so there might just be just that what if thing, but if you have children involved and it's not affecting them firsthand, but then you say you start abusing these substances and then you start neglecting your children, you're not hurting them, but you are hurting them.
It's the same. I think it's the same as being alcohol being a mitigating factor. It's like it's no excuse at all. It doesn't matter.
But I think you're going with that if there are no consequences for using drugs that you would have. Oh, yeah. Is that what you?
Yeah. Like you could effectively use them. You're not hurting anyone. You're just using them yourself.
Like a meth user, for example, like a meth using parent.
So,
but the consequences affect others.
Yeah. So I guess the argument to that then is that's coming from the premise that if drugs are illegal, which they are, that people don't use drugs, but people do use drugs.
Yeah.
So if drugs were illegal, which they are, meant that people don't do them, okay, there'd be an argument for that. But the problem is that people still, especially meth, which is obviously the big one in New Zealand, people still get their hands on meth. And there's also the argument then, if all drugs were legal, that people might choose less nefarious alternatives to meth if they could just go down and buy some morphine or and there's been surveys done of that in Auckland where they asked drug users like, why do you buy meth, or would you buy an alternative or something? And a lot of people say we buy meth because we can't get cannabis, which seems crazy because cannabis is pretty prevalent in New Zealand, but yeah, meth probably is more prevalent. So that's it. There's people out there who just wanted to smoke pot, but they couldn't get any, so I'll have to smoke meth then because it's better than nothing. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's an argument, and it doesn't even have. My preference would be complete legalization, but it doesn't even have to be that. It can just be decriminalization. So it's still legal to sell them, but if you're caught with a few bags, there's 100% no chance that you get penalized. At the moment, there is discretion applied, but there's still a chance you get an old school boomer cop who's like, you've got a gram of MDMA. So
your example, I think, is just the hypothetical of a meth using parent. I think it just which makes them a negligent or just generally shit parent. I don't think, like, unfortunately, being a shit parent isn't a crime. So I think it's unrelated.
Yes, I think that's a problem as well. And then there's also
there are shit sober parents.
Yes, there's that, and then we can also again use to me is using alcohol as the benchmark. Alcohol is legal, and if you look at on a scientific list that's out there that was done by the NHS or something in the UK, alcohol is like second or third on the list of like most harmful drugs, and I think it's the most harmful, maybe the second most harmful, maybe behind crack or meth, in terms of the damage that it does to society. They base it on damage it does to the user itself and the damage it does to society. In
dollar terms, I think they use it. Yeah. Damage.
I'd have to recheck, but whatever metric they use, it's not hard to believe because I've even seen the stats thrown around. The amount of money that's lost in the economy from just people calling in sick because they have a hangover, it's huge. It's tens of billions of dollars a year. But then you have that, you have the crashes, you have the king hits, you just have the rapes, the carnage that alcohol causes across a large sample size, and yet that's legal. So if alcohol is legal, I think that should be the benchmark for legality. If you have a drug that is less,
everything less,
which is categorically for drugs like mushrooms and ketamine and LSD. Yeah. Especially in terms of harm to society, because you said like those drugs, you're not going out robbing dairies.
You're not
or
raping on
you're not doing terrible things.
I think. Sorry, I just wanted to say because we're now going to run out of time soon enough, but because we have more touched on like we would class as like the petty crimes, is like you know, burglary and
the serious
that sort of stuff. But then obviously we don't want to not talk about things like murder and manslaughter, etc.
Mm-hmm. I think
should we be taking like a page out of the book as like the Americans do, because it seems like their like sentences are a lot more severe, so
very unforgiving.
Yeah,
I don't think we should be taking a page out of the American book, because I think their legal system is way too severe. I think we're probably a little bit light on things like murder in New Zealand. I think the max sentence life is 20 years, although they do have that regulation where they can keep people in even after 20 if they think they're still a threat to society. But 20 years is probably a bit light for an outright murder without like it's not a, what do they call it, a crime of passion. If you catch your wife sleeping with another dude and you kill one or both of them, that's a mitigating factor, right? Because you're furious, you're enraged. You still should be punished. Obviously, you can't get away with that, but that is a mitigating factor. So, but for an outright murder, you go to your neighbor and you shoot him in the face for no reason. I think 20 years and that's not even considering parole. You can probably get out, if all going well, you can probably get on parole after 12 years. I think that should be either close or fully life in prison, in terms of you stay in prison for your entire life, or very, very close to it. Maybe there can be some catches where you can get out after, I don't know. I don't have an exact figure, but 20 with the ability, I believe, of parole after 12. I have a feeling I've read is the average. That's a wee bit light for an outright murder with no mitigating. Because
I'd say if you run the math, for example, for someone in their 20s, so you could argue their prefrontal cortex wasn't fully developed.
Mm-hmm.
Getting 20 years, effectively could get out at 40, do it again.
Yes.
20 years, 60. Mm-hmm. You could murder up to 3 people in their lifetime. Not to say they will. You know, you'd hope there'd be some reform. But is that like too? Yeah, like is it too forgiving? Or
I think it's a little bit too forgiving.
Because it does seem like sometimes you'll hear. Often there might be like a crime that happens, or a murder, and it's like this person was only given 12 years, and it's like it doesn't seem right. But then you might say, oh, this person's been given 50 or 75 years in the US. And you're like, that's dumb. They're going to die in prison.
Yeah, I think that's even pretty light on the American scale. Yeah. I think in most cases, if you do like an outright murder, you're getting like more than life. They do it where they add up. You get like 200 years.
Again, in America as well, it's part of crime and punishment in general is part of just living in a civilized society. It's going to come. And
it's
so
always
like
happened.
when you have like with drug.
Sorry, so you got privatized prisons over there, whereas here it's more.
I think there's one privatized prison here. I think.
Oh, just one.
Maybe Mount Eden. It's owned by a company called Serco. Not the Serco, not the travel company on the NZ stock market. Serco with a C. I believe that. I think it's the Mount Eden one. It's certainly a prison up north, but that's the only one in the country, I believe.
But you were saying, sorry.
I forgot my main point, but I was gonna say, like in the American system, you know, enforcement of the drug laws and even murder. I'm not saying, you know, you have a choice to whether to murder someone, but you know, in a hood situation where your prospects are real shit and you start selling drugs because it's a viable, like it makes sense.
Yep.
And then, you know, that can be enforced. So it's almost I think that's where a lot of people who claim institutionalized racism wrongly call it. It's like it is unfairly stacked against certain people and certain upbringings. Like that you know.
But it's not the system. It's their culture.
Well,
I think that's the case.
If you're born in Detroit, like middle of Detroit, like your prospects are pretty rough.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's your environment rather than culture / environment. Your parents and your environment are stacked against you. But that's not the system. That's not. So yeah, there's a high, if you're born on 8 Mile in Detroit, there's a higher probability that you're going to be a drug dealer, a murderer, a criminal, whatever. And so there's a higher chance that you're going to end up in jail. But that's not because the jail or the system is inherently racist against you.
No.
It's because your environment is terrible. Yeah, and that's where a lot of people go wrong. It's the same in New Zealand where people say that it's stacked against Maoris because more Maoris are in prison. But if they're actually doing the crimes, then it's not actually the system that's racist, is it? They're just being fairly punished for what they're doing.
Yeah. But I mean, I know in America there was legal racism not that long ago, like two generations ago, which I think causes you know, if your grandma's born in Detroit, like actual racist, institutionalized racism, then your parents just don't ever move out. They kind of do it right. Then you're born into it, and in this like degrading, underfunded town.
Right.
It's kind of like it's the snowball's already started, so it is way harder. It's way less of a fair start.
It is. And I don't disagree with you. And like people have the same thing about Maori here, colonization.
Yeah.
The trauma, they've been screwed for so long, so they're starting from an uneven fair point. And that's where the equity term comes from. They should get more than the average white person to make up for the oppression or whatever, colonization. But I think there is a little bit of merit to that, but not to the extent that some people are going with it. And ultimately, end of the day, even if it was unfair that your parents were brought up when things were truly racist in Detroit or wherever in America or in New Zealand, if you still commit a serious crime, you can't really like have there is some mitigation. You do get, I believe, often Maori will get a mitigation based on culture, whether that be family or just purely race. I don't know, but I do hear that thrown around. They get like 2 or 3 years taken off the sentence. But you can't just be like, oh, well, because your parents were screwed by the system 60 years ago and you murdered someone or you did a ram raid, we're not going to punish you because we understand why you did it, because you were screwed. You still have to kind of punish them, don't you? You can take that into account, and that's very fair. Oh, we understand you have had a terrible childhood. We'll take some time off your sentence and we'll try and like focus more on rehabilitation than throwing the book at you. We'll try and get you in some rehabilitation programs before you go to prison or whatever it is after prison, give you more of a helping hand sort of thing. But you still have to punish them, don't you? Even if we can admit, even if we can sit here and say, which I don't believe it's concrete, but you can speculate that these Maoris are in prison on a higher percentage than white people because colonization. Shit, I forget where I was going with that. I've drawn a blank. I think where I was going is, you can't really like. You can be like,
at some point you've got to be like, okay.
Yeah, we can understand that that's true. You come from a bad standpoint, or like I think maybe where I was going, like ultimately, if they're still committing the crimes, they still have to be punished. And even if you can sit there and say, oh, it's because they had a bad base, it's like,
yeah.
What can you do? It's like
the chicken and the egg. You can't enable them.
Exactly.
Doing the same
we can all sit here and say, yes, you're disadvantaged because your parents were disadvantaged because things were truly racist back in the day, but you can't doesn't mean that the system is racist if they're actually committing the crimes.
If you can give them a leg up, but if they don't decide to take that leg, well then you kind of still have to punish them.
Yeah. It's a tricky one.
It's another tricky one, and I'm coming around to that a lot more than I used to. I used to be very dismissive. No black person today was a direct descendant of a slave or whatever, but I do.
People's grandparents, it's like two. Oh no, not slave grandparents.
And as because again, this is we touched on it last week, how like privileged we are to live in like such beautiful times, despite the madness that still happens. But it's hard to fathom. Just in like 1960, I think Maoris were still pretty screwed here. And blacks in America were certainly still screwed. Like in the 60s, they still were segregated. You couldn't sit on the bus and things like that.
The talk about
it's hard to believe like how screwed that is because things are so good now. But yes, there are lingering remnants of that trauma.
Speaking of so good, I think how we said there's mitigation for someone who's been real downtrodden, perhaps for a couple of generations, and you go, we got to punish you, but that's taken into consideration. Equally, then I don't think this is really a thing. on the other end, when we live super privileged lives, if we then commit a crime, that should also be taken into consideration. Like, you had no excuse for that. You had all the opportunities in the world, and you still, I don't know, murdered someone, I suppose.
I see where you're going with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
And possibly you could be more harsh on people who had better upbringings.
Yeah,
That's subjective, though.
It's murky because then at some point you might have to have like a, I don't know, like a checklist of what defines your upbringing.
Subjective,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like
Yeah.
some person might have lived in with a silver spoon in their hand, had everything given to them, blah 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 blah, but they lack the love of their parents, and that causes them to do. It's like, well, they lived a privileged life, but then you might have like, I don't know, poor Māori family who really did a hard struggle, but they had, they had that, I don't know, like some member of their church who wanted to help them and lift them up, but then they decided, like, it's so subjective.
Complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. There's no clear-cut answer to everyone has different lives, upbringings.
Mentioning church and serious crimes, eye for an eye, that's a biblical quote, isn't it? Or message.
That's something that gets used and thrown at a lot of people, but without the context.
What do you guys think about eye for an eye then? For serious, so death penalty essentially is what I'm talking about. It can be very gentle with the justice.
I'm not going out of my way to try and, I'm not one of these thoughts. Yeah, we need it, but if it was brought back, I wouldn't have an issue with it, as long as there's absolutely zero doubt. It has to be 100%
that it was them that did the murder.
There's not a shadow of a doubt they've ever confessed. Which, there's clear evidence, because confessions could still be made if it's under duress. There has to be clear, just irrefutable, not 99.9% chance, 100%.
Video footage of them doing the crime.
Well, these days with AI, even that's not going to be video. That's not going to be.
Well, anyway, so it has to be clear cut, and they obviously have to have their rights to the heaps of appeals, which they do get in America, up to, I don't know, lots of appeals, so they can delay it 10, 20 years. To make it even clearer, and it also has to be for heinous crimes. A lot of the times those people who are doing those are full psychopaths and will admit it. They'll be like, they're crazy enough to be like, I did it. I'll do it again. And that's an interesting,
which makes it easy. That's the easiest decision to make. Like, okay,
true.
well then we're going to kill you.
So it has to be for a heinous crime. I'm not even sure if just outright murder would be quite high enough. It could be. But something like
sex trafficking.
Well, the classic case of like a heinous crime in the States is like killing a pregnant woman, something like that. You kill I don't know, you rape her and then you kill her, a pregnant woman. So that's like heinous, something like that, sadistic. So it has to be a heinous crime, case for murder, but dependent. But as I say, I don't care if we don't have it. I'm not going out of my way to be like, we need to bring it. But if we did have it, I'd be okay with it for very, very strict criteria. So that is my stance. That if we don't have it, I'm not at all concerned that we don't have it. If we did have it, I'm okay with it as long as it's extremely tight. If it was a bit loose, which I think it is a bit loose in America, because we've all heard the stories of the people who've been cleared after they were put to death. That
it's not worth one innocent person dying.
Exactly. So it has to be that. So it's probably, I would lean on it's just better to be safe than sorry and don't have a death penalty, because as you say, it's not worth one.
Pretty reasonable.
Personally for me, I try and understand, like, put your feet in that situation, but I just don't think it's right for any one person or group, government, etc., to have the power over an individual to take away their life. That's just my opinion. Obviously, if they've done something wrong, murder, whatever, like it's that old saying, it's like, just because they did it doesn't mean that you should be able to do it too. Like, it's
there's also the turn the other cheek is also another biblical
sort of thing. But
message, which is completely
the eye for an eye thing, in terms of that's more from like the early Jewish scripture. So like that's what they were practicing at the time. But anyway, that's a side story.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily right. And like David said, yeah, if there's one innocent person who's been framed or whatever, like it's not worth it. But then I understand that there's so much resources that get taken up keeping people in prison for years and years as a taxpayer. You know how there's an argument.
100K.
Yeah, 100K. Yeah, it's
prisoner,
like,
I think.
and they're for the most part, prisons in New Zealand are pretty well, like, you know, some would say better condition than the State House.
Yeah,
possibly,
yeah.
you know.
There's rumours they say they have like Sky TV in their room and stuff like that.
But it's like, I don't think it's right to take away the person's life, but there needs to be some sort of punishment. And I would hope, and my obviously it's a hope that every person, despite what they have done, can be reformed. But I know that's not the case.
Yeah, I think a lot can be. Say for something like a basic murder. So I don't know if you consider just walking up to your neighbour and shooting him in the face a basic murder. I mean,
school shooter, perhaps use that as an excuse, as an example, maybe.
No, because that's like a premeditated sort of sadistic.
Is it not what you're meaning? What you're
No.
about?
So like just like a murder that's not like.
So like road rage, for example, if someone cuts you off in traffic,
it could arguably
You kill him.
Yeah, or I'm thinking like, yeah, you're robbing a bank. You don't actually want to kill someone, but in the heat of the moment, you kill
security
someone.
guard gets in front of you.
Yeah, so I guess that might be called. I don't know if that would be aggravated, but it's like it's not like a heinous sadistic thing. You're not, raping a young girl and then murdering her. Like that's a heinous murder.
Would it be considered splitting hairs though for differentiating murders? Like murder's murder.
Well,
Isn't
I do think that there is separations within the system. There's like first degree, second degree, third degree. So like I assume third is like the lightest one. That would be something like, as I say, like a crime of passion. It's still not right to kill your wife or the dude that's sleeping with him, but there's like a kind of valid reason to be enraged and kill one or both of them. As I say, there is not a valid reason to walk up and shoot your neighbour in the head. Or if there's arguments going on in the heat, you pull out a knife and you stab him. Again, that might be somewhat of a mitigating circumstance. I forget where were we going with that anyway. Yeah, forget. I can't remember. We're trying to lead that into something, but I can't remember.
It's one of those things. It just got too much of a tangent. Heinous crimes though, like.
Oh, sorry. I think we're talking about like. Oh, we're talking about if they could be reformed.
Yeah.
Death penalty.
So
reformation.
Well, or just being like reformed, and you can get them to accept that they did their crime and truly remorseful. I think if you did like a basic murder, so that's what I mean, like in the heat of the moment, you're robbing a bank, you shoot the security guard, you didn't really want to do that, but in the heat of the moment you did it. I think that person can be probably reformed. Now, arguably anyone can be reformed, but if you went out and you found a family, the mother was pregnant, you raped her, you killed her, and you also killed any other family members in the household, you're clearly like a very sick person. You can see that's different to someone who, in the heat of a moment, someone got in their way when they're robbing a bank, as opposed to someone who's like, I'm going to go out and rape a pregnant woman and kill her and kill her on the family. Like that's I would say sadistic. I'm not sure that they can be reformed. Arguably they can. But
I don't know. Yeah, there's like a percent or something of the population that's always going to be psychopathic.
True, like psychopaths cannot be reformed, can they?
With enough electrostimulation.
I think it's an interesting, and again, probably a little bit of a tangent with psychopaths, but like I touched on earlier with like the hacker example, how they could be given a lifeline to work for the good guys.
It's like white hat hacking.
Yes. Yeah. Same with psychopaths. Like when we think of psychopaths, we think of like American Psycho, right? Killing homeless people, killing cats, feeding them into ATM machines, like sadistic psychopath. We think of that. But psychopaths... Get off, cat. Get off.
Yeah.
Psychopaths can equally be put in a place where they can utilize their psychopathy. So an example of that would be like military. So they could become... I'd
feel like they're like a loose cannon, like like at any moment it could go wrong.
Well, it's really fascinating, actually, because I think we probably greatly misunderstand psychopaths. I don't know it hell of we tend to think psychopaths are gonna be sickos, they're gonna be criminals. I remember watching, I think there's a dude. He was like a lecturer, and I think he was like doing a lecture on psychopathy, and then found out later that he was a psychopath himself. And there's things like, it was just really like simple stuff, like he never said he truly felt like he loved his wife and stuff, but he wasn't like a sicko. He just didn't feel human emotion. So he was essentially a normal dude, but he just didn't. Yeah. So
like the pedophiles that don't act on it. What do they call themselves?
Yeah, that's
minor. Yeah,
that's another. It's
like
a little bit more grey area because.
Yeah, it's a tangent. There's a tangent. We won't go.
Okay, but we have to wrap up very soon anyway.
Psychopaths aren't inherently evil. They can be put to
just
good
weird.
use. If you they just don't feel human emotion. So if they're put in the right environment, they can thrive. It's kind of like anything else. And
I think war and
ADHD, if you're put in the right environment, you can thrive.
War in the military is kind of, I think, psychopathic at its base. Like war is psychopathic anyway. So that's a good.
In a sense. But we can argue that there's good wars or good guys and bad guys in war. So if we, again,
I think there's always a psychopath though that starts it, at least. If there's a just war, I think there's a psychopath on the other end that has caused you to have to participate in a just war.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, or it could be sociopath, or they call it megalomaniac. I don't know. Yeah, it's something.
It just shouldn't be the answer ever.
But yeah, so just to, again, it was very if we go on the premise that the United States military are the good guys. And you be a psychopath soldier for the United States military, that's you fighting for the good guys and like using your psychopathy to your advantage because you're not going to feel any remorse for killing the bad guys.
Killing Afghani women and children.
PTSD, which is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
I
just think this like shouldn't be funny, but like unless like no, I'm not going to make a joke.
Well,
enlisting school shooters to like go to Afghanistan and do the dirty work there, because it was dirty. I'm saying it's dirty what they did in there.
It's definitely dirty work. I don't know if
I'm saying it's just as like it's egregious as like school shooters, in my opinion.
We don't want to go too many tangents. I think we should probably.
I think one way to wrap up nicely is
can of worms here.
Yeah, no, this is a really clear point. I think again, in my ideal legal system, I think New Zealand legal system does a pretty good job of this. If there is mitigating circumstances, there's a lack of intention. So, for example, I'll try and make this quick. Financial crimes are typically punished pretty hard because if you're scamming someone, you're running a Ponzi scheme, there's no way that can be by accident, can it? Maybe. Not really. If you accidentally run someone over and you're not drunk, you accidentally crash into someone, run them over, you didn't intend to do it. And people get upset, they killed someone and they're getting less crime than someone who ran a Ponzi scheme. But it's the intention. So you have to separate. Someone who's running a Ponzi scheme it's nefarious intention. It's not good intention. They're doing it purpose. Someone who accidentally runs someone over because they didn't see them and they weren't drunk, they weren't speeding, complete accident. It's different, even though
still murder.
Even though
not a Ponzi scheme.
It'd be manslaughter.
It's manslaughter.
It's the intention is different. Yeah. Even though it's a worse outcome, and someone died, other people have lost money. Yeah. That's the worst. It's the worst thing, losing your life, isn't it? But they did it by accident. Those people did it. So you have to separate by intention. I think New Zealand legal system does a good job of that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a fair point, actually. I think that's fair. Like, we didn't think about it in that sense. But I think we need to wrap it up because we are going a bit over time.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Next week should be an interesting one. We'll have a guest on next week.
Yeah, potentially. Or has it been confirmed?
Just as confirmed as it was a couple of weeks ago. I haven't spoken to him since about it. But
cool. Well, we'll make sure that it's definitely confirmed. Probably, we'll have a guest episode appearance. Otherwise, if not, we'll have something else to talk about. But we'll wrap it up there for episode 33. Thank you everyone for listening. Be sure to follow us on our socials, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And we're now on YouTube, so if you want to actually see us on YouTube, you can find us there at the Friday Council. But otherwise, peace out.
Nice, Nev.
Have a good council.
Later.
Peace.